So the show is just over 50 works on paper by Italian artists from the Renaissance. So that's from the 1400s to the beginning of the 19th century. And it essentially is a story around these three great episodes of Christ's life: his birth, his incarnation, his death, the episodes around the crucifixion, and his coming to life, and then his moving up to heaven. And it's a show, obviously deeply Catholic. Italy is a very Catholic country, but it was devised as a show that you could be Jewish or Buddhist or have no religion at all, and you would find things of interest, because it's really covers these two great moments in all of our lives, which is birth and death. And it's about how artists treated the body of Christ. How did they tell these very, very familiar stories, which everybody in Italy would have known about? How did they make them different? How, in telling these narratives, did they adopt different angles, tell it through different viewpoints, using light and shade to give different accents? And I think it's a story that shows the amazing creativity of artists throughout the centuries working on paper, both in prints and in drawings. So some very big names in the show, some of the great treasures of the British Museum by very familiar artists like Michelangelo, a wonderful crucifixion scene in red chalk, which shows Christ looking up to the left at this. Well, what is he looking at? That's quite a question. Is it an angel from God, or is it the soul of a departed thief going up to heaven? And then below him are these wonderful group of lamenting women around the Virgin Mary. This incredible kind of show of emotion, and it's generally it's an exhibition which is full of emotion, the joy of birth, but also the realization that the Virgin Mary has at all times is that her son is going to die, and so death is sort of always there and always present. So there's this incredible poignancy as you look at an image of a mother and child. That mother knows that in 30 years' time she will be holding that adult child at the foot of the cross, and he will be, his body will be horribly, kind of bloodied, and he will have suffered, and she knows that at all times. And then his body rises again. So it's these sort of different states that artists have to deal with. How does the body of the resurrected Christ, how are they going to show it differently from the body of Christ on earth? All these sort of fine nuances. So it's I think it's an amazing show. It's got these great artists, not all of them familiar names necessarily, but there are some very, very famous artists like Benozzo Gozzoli or Fra Filippo Lippi, Carlo Maratta, others. But hopefully anybody going to see the show will see some really amazing works on paper, some of the great treasures of the British Museum, and they're here until mid-April. So they've got to see it, and then they'll go away and they'll live in their boxes in the British Museum and never be seen, certainly in New Mexico again. So it is an amazing opportunity, and I'm very excited to see the reaction. I think in Santa Fe is a city which has got so many people who are creative people who make paintings, or they sculpt, or they make jewelry. It's a very, very creative town, and what they'll make, the kind of inspiration they'll see in these drawings is going to be a real kind of thrill for me to see their reactions to it. And also, New Mexico is a very, there's lots of Catholics here, so they'll be very familiar with these stories, and I think you get an added resonance if you understand these sacred stories, as because the audience who were looking at the prints also knew these stories very well. But as I say, you don't have to be a practicing anything to enjoy the show. You can just enjoy it from the level of art. and they're really, these prints and drawings are really very beautiful, and I think most profoundly they're very, very moving. They're meant to touch our emotions, and I think they work very, very well, and it's a very kind of moving, a very kind of inspirational show. So the show came about through a friendship with somebody called Robert Hone, who is very close to the University of San Diego. He supports their museum at the University of San Diego, and he's a great lover of prints, and we've worked in collaboration with him on a variety of works on paper show. And he's also a very devout Catholic, and so I knew he was looking to do another show, and so I got out a curator, Sarah Vowles, who's a curator of Italian prints and drawings, and I put together a selection around the life of Christ, and just sort of put them out in our study room back in London, and said, here are 50 odd works, and we think they fit very well together. There's a lot of kind of works that you look at, and they're telling the same story but from different angles. And when Bob saw these drawings, prints and drawings, he went, "Wow, this will be a fantastic exhibition." So it really began from that. We were just seeing whether they liked it. So the show's been in San Diego. It was a big success there. It was both at San Diego and also the Timken Museum. And so it comes to Santa Fe, the same show but brought together. So you've got all of those 50 works are in one place. So in a way, it's a different dynamic. The earliest drawing is from the 1430s. Well, I suppose, for me, what these artists are looking at are these eternal questions of God's presence. The Christian story of Christ coming down to earth, the incarnation of God to be with us. So that's about the sacred, and I think it's how to represent a sacred body, how to represent God in human form. That is still, whether you see God in nature or you don't, or the spiritual. You don't necessarily have to be a believer in the Christian God. You can see that sense of the spiritual, which I think, most of us have. When you go out here and you see an amazing sunset, you feel you're part of a greater whole. And I think that's what these drawings touch on. And they touch on themes which are the joys of a newborn child, its innocence, its the delicacy, its vulnerability, and also just the extraordinary anguish of death, the loss and sense of pain and anguish, which all of us feel at one time in our lives. So these are things that are going to, you're going to be looking at these drawings in 500 years' time, and these are going to be the same, because these are the things that are going to stay with us. These big questions of why are we here? What are our lives about? What's going to happen to us after we're dead? These are eternal. And in Italy in the Renaissance and later, they dealt with those issues in a particular way, and some of us still feel those are relevant. Oh, that's very hard. That's like kind of saying which is my favorite child, or I don't know. I suppose what is the one that really kind of I suppose out of those 50 words, every day I could say a different one, but maybe it is the Benozzo Gozzoli. That's a drawing of angels. For two reasons it's a favourite. Firstly, it's a very recent arrival at the British Museum. We just acquired it in the last couple of years. So most of our collection, as you can imagine, Renaissance drawings are way beyond our budget. We got this through a tax settlement, so it's a very new thing, and I was very excited. It was like a kind of, I want to share this with San Diego and Santa Fe. This is my new baby, and I've just find it an amazingly touching drawing. So it's a drawing by Gottsley where he's really studying the poses of these angels adoring the Christ child, and he's taken infinite care to show the light and shade on their draperies to get a sense of that they are standing in space, that they are sculptural, three-dimensional bodies. And what's so poignant to me is the fact that it's part of a very famous chapel that Gottsley did in the Palazzo Medici Riccardi. There were many, many hundreds of figures in that chapel, and this is the one drawing that survives. So looking at that drawing, you get a sense that he must have made hundreds and hundreds of drawings for each and every individual figure, and yet this is the only one that survives. So there's that extraordinary sense of what is lost through the survival of one work, and I find that both something to celebrate, but also one's sort of aware of what has been lost.